Well, friends, let me open us in prayer, and then I'll tell you how I'd like to roll. I want to make sure everybody gets in. Jim, I'm going to make Jim Dixon. If I make you co-host, will you keep your eye on admitting people? If I mess up, can you do that or no?
I can try.
Okay. Because this So, friends, I have, I'm Faye Wonderland from your Synod exec, and working with some information that has come out, and we're sharing that we're going to have some conversation about. I'm going to do some presenting as we go through. We're going to talk about this, some of the trends that people are anticipating. I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. But welcome. I hope you all got to stretch where you needed to stretch for just a minute. We will not go past noon, which is one of the reasons I'm kicking in. I have you in front of me, and I'm about to share a PowerPoint. And I have a gallery with many of you on my left so I can see you. If you have questions, I would ask you to either put them in the chat and I will try to watch that, or if I miss something because I'm watching too much, just speak up. We are few enough in the workshops that I think as long as you don't have background noise, we can do this a little more conversationally and you can unmute yourself. If you have background noise, please be sensitive to that and keep yourself muted unless you want to speak. I'm going to trust you to be good judges of that. But I've been in workshops with a number of you, and I know that you're good about that one. So let's open in prayer, and then I'll share with you a little bit more about what we're up to. Gracious and holy God, it is a time like most of us have never experienced, and we're trying to look out over the horizon and wondering what we see. Unlike when we look behind and it's a little clearer, it's hazy, oh Lord. And so some of what we wonder about is guesses, but we know that's what we have to do, like Israel, perhaps in the wilderness with Moses. We need to keep stepping out and anticipating as best we can, testing, trying, even when it's scary, and not denying what we see around us. We pray your blessing upon our ears as we hear and our voices as we share. In Christ's name, amen. So, friends, thank you for being here. There is a man out in our church world who I think was trained as a Reformed pastor. He is an independent church pastor in Canada. His name is Kerry Newhoff. And he does he does tons of research, puts out tons of blogs. You will, when we send the PowerPoint out, you will see his info on the front end of this PowerPoint. There's all kinds of stuff that he is thinking about. And I checked with some colleagues of mine who used this work previously. And I said, is this stuff, can we count on him enough that we should be watching his work? And they said, I think so. I think there's value in it. So we realized that we are guessing, and Kerry is doing some research, and these are some of the trends. We're going to talk about some of the things that he sees on the horizon. Now, I will tell you that he is looking he's looking at right now. And I know Tim was hard to come down on right now, because Tim is working with statistics, and most statistics you only have in hindsight, correct? So we're going to be dealing with a little more guesswork, but my peers suggest to me that this guesswork is pretty good. We can count on it a bit. So we're going to wonder together, and I'm going to invite you into the conversation. This is being recorded, so this will be available to you, and we will also send you the PowerPoints after the fact. Jim, you got that? You admitted, right? Okay, thank you. So let's get started. Let's get started right away. 7 disruptive leadership trends that will rule 2021. He does this for every year. This was created towards the end of 2020 when we've been living in COVID for enough time. And so he started looking around, and I want you to unmute yourselves or put in the chat. How about put in the chat? What do you think of disruptive? What are the pluses and minuses? First, the minuses of disruption. What does disruption mean to you? Let's see what you have to say. Unprepared. Yep. What else? Already had other plans. Oh, yes. Uncomfortable. Yes. We sure know about already had other plans when COVID hit, right? Confusion. Absolutely, Nancy. Can't do what you were doing. Yes, Gary. How about you may have to think a little bit longer for this one. What are the positives of disruption? I'm checking in from home with a new puppy, Dave Lee. Why am I not surprised? Yep. This connection of skinship and intimacy. Yep. Unexpected opportunities. That's a positive. Unexpected opportunities. What else? Forced to understand video and technology. Yep, for some people, that's true. Thinking in new terms, new ideas. Building is not as important. Yep, these are all going to come up in a little bit. Disrupting dysfunctional behavior. Well, let me get us onto a denominator. Thank you for this. Thank you for this. Let me get us onto another. Make sure that another picture here. So to disrupt, right? To disrupt means to cause something to be unable to continue in the, oh, there's that word we are learning to love to hate, normal way, right? Something to be unable to continue in the normal way. This is from a Fast Company article. To interrupt the normal progress or activity of, boom, you fill in the blank. So we certainly know what that is. I mean, we certainly understand that. We experience that. We are continuing to experience that. Now, there's been use of this word for a long time. And in fact, those who are the disruptors among us or beyond us are often the people who are cast to the side when they start disrupting and discounted, and who, according to this article, may end up being the people who are our coaches, helping us to see the new ways. Because disruptors are the ones who see and test the way forward before the rest of us are ready to do it. Now, you know this. Disruption can be something that comes into our lives intentionally or unintentionally. COVID was an unintentional disruption, and we had no choice, or I don't know how we would have had a choice to deal with it or not. Even if it was denying it, that's a choice to deal with it. COVID was there. But there are also intentional disruptions. There are presbyteries that have been intentionally disrupting their normal for a lot of years. They have been trying to make things upside down. So as we look at these disruptions, I'd like you to consider whether they're unintentional or whether perhaps they might be unintentional, but you might maximize them by making them more intentional in your world. As we go through these, this is the important place where you all come in. I'd like us to think about each one of these as they're presented and consider, have we seen evidence of this disruption or heard anecdotal evidence of this disruption? If possible, what skills or mindsets do, pastors and leaders need to navigate, explore, or integrate the disruption even before some may see it's occurring? Now, let me give you an example of that. There are many folks out there for whom the maximization of technology in the church, and for a lot of our smaller churches, they've just about maximized, at least for now, was a disruption. Some folks have integrated and gone well beyond. Some folks have, it's now second nature to them. For others, some who shall remain nameless in my world, they still have trouble getting on a Zoom meeting. And I'm not criticizing that, because some of that is about exposure and the way our brains work and what we're comfortable with. But it's still, every time they have to push that button link is a disruption. So how do we help our pastors to navigate these disruptions? Also, where does presbytery, since you're here representing the presbytery more than anything, where does the presbytery need to put some energy and imagination to support pastors in addressing or dealing with or integrating the disruption? I'll keep these questions in front of me. You don't have to. And does this say anything to you about what might be emerging for the church? I'm hoping we can do a lot of that for each of these disruptions, okay? Which means I'm going to be asking you to unmute and participate that way so that we can all hear. So let's kick right into what Carrie says is a first disruption. Now, this is one that Tim was not sure we were going to see, but there's a lot of folks, not just Carrie Newhoff, expecting this. Super high turnover. Super high turnover. The expectation is that we may only see 37% of our members return post-COVID. And my suspicion, my suspicion, and it's anecdotal, where return to the congregational work, Michael. Returning to the congregational work.
Wow.
Returning to active participation in the congregation. I think that's probably low, but it's short term. We've had some we're going to see why this may be, but he anticipates high turnover. Hold that in your mind. Now, the folks at Duke that Tim Cargill's working with are not ready to go there. But what we want to think about this in terms of members and folks living in their life in the presbytery. He is willing to say that we can expect more retirements. And indeed, anecdotally, I am hearing that to be true. People, and part of it's a two-pronged rationale for that. There are people who waited COVID out because they felt they wanted to honor their congregations. And there are also folks that have had it. We'll be talking more about that overall. Go ahead.
Yes, Sue, do you want us to chime in or not? I mean, I would
love for you to chime in.
I would say I concur with that in terms of hearing from some of our pastors who are close to retirement, and I think could have and would have easily and happily 5 years ago been like, I'll do another 4 or 5 years. And they've said to Aaron and me, I mean, directly, and this is a verbatim quote, I can get them back in the building, but I don't know what to do next. And so I'm done. I mean, and said with a faithful spirit, I would say,
No, I don't think there's a whine about it.
Right.
If you see the article I put in and the link to this article, and some of these are good, some of these are better than others, but that's at the end of the PowerPoint. Accelerated succession timelines is another way of talking about this. Yep. And how many times have some of you heard this? I just didn't sign up for this. They really need a digital native, and I'm not. It's time to speed up and get the next person in. Or that may be more a person that didn't have a digital native to help in the congregation, and they've been pushing and double dutying and triple dutying. So the expectation is that we'll see a lot of turnover. Now, how about you all? Do you see any evidence or anecdotal evidence of this kind of disruption? Speak up. Go ahead and speak up.
We actually have one person who's on COM that expressed this very thing to me in an email, and Nancy Bostian's on here too. She's our chair, and she probably I think I copied her, but he's tired. He says, I hate Zoom. I just might have to check out of Presbytery until we get back to in person. So, and he's one of our moderators, retired, but yeah, I'm here. That's one person.
So this is Kate from Huntington talking.
Yes.
So we're talking about a primarily rural, small town region, right?
Yes.
Where face-to-face relationships. Barbara, did you want to say something? You're muted if you did. Barbara Jewett. Okay. Mark Cho, I hope it's a short-term return rate expectation in the year 2021. Not yet. Not yet. The pandemic finished completely. I don't know. I think that's a really good question, Mark. I think that's a good question. My wondering is, so it anecdotally, I think there's a number of ways we're hearing this. What does the presbytery need to put some energy and imagination into to support pastors to maybe not hang in there longer if they're hanging in there, but to get a little bit more balance so they can make some decisions, especially if they're seeing this with membership? How might the presbytery be a resource if this disruption is real? Mary Kay, I'm tired because I'm a tech person, right? Well, what might the presbytery do?
Sue, I was remembering a conversation I had with a friend of mine. So this is not a Synod of the Trinity colleague. I mean, not that I don't think it matters in terms of this, who said he was talking with a young family who pre-COVID was in worship, 3 out of 4 Sundays, 4 out of 4 Sundays. I mean, they're teaching Sunday school, young kids, really active. I mean, kind of, what we all long to kind of, have, right? And they are wealthy enough that they've got a family cabin up in the mountains, and they've discovered that their kids' lives have been less crazy, and they've been going up and doing weekends in the family cabin and coming back, and they attend worship online. But my friend said, I don't think they're coming back, or if they're coming back, they're going to come back 1 Sunday a month in person. And that I think that's going to be a disruption too. I mean, some of the people, this 37% or whoever more the returns, they're going to return in different ways. They're going to return with different expectations. They're going to be even more kind of with all of us ensconced in this consumerist attitude toward all that we do, that it's available in the way that we want it to be, when we want it to be. And I think that's going to be a huge disruption.
And that's what we laugh. I am the tech person. Mary Kay, I sympathize. I've been the tech person since day one for my husband's church, and I'm trying to get, we're trying to get to a point where we can invite other people into that role, God willing, and the creek don't rise. But we kid about, it's really comfortable to have coffee in your pajamas and at church and watch and do church. It's really lovely if you prefer wine for communion to actually be able to have that when many of our churches can't. There is a larger church near my husband's, we're in he's Philadelphia Presbytery, that resisted for the longest time doing live streaming because the pastor thought that would be more likely to keep people from coming back when the time came. I stopped following it after about 8 months. Whether legitimate or not, that was the rationale. Stepping back a second, Dave Lee has raised a good point about the presbytery, that it is pastors and leaders that we are resourcing about this. So maybe this is part of the answer to how we work on this, is to include and open up the window to who we resource, and to invite as many people into the conversation as possible. Because if we hide saying there's a number of people that aren't coming back or aren't coming back as we know it, if we keep that information super quiet, that's less minds to wrestle with it. It also means less support for wrestling with it. So we must resource leaders. We are ruling and teaching. Jim Balaji, yes, more self-care and time off for pastors who think they can't leave the pulpit any week. That is a real concern for our pastors. And there's another whole disruption that's going to deal with that one. So hold that thought. What this says about the new church that might be emerging, I believe, is some of what Michael was leaning into in his comment, friends, that we really have to begin to get a grip about what It means where we're going. We are not going back. So hold that thought, because some of these overlap, and we'll talk more about that. Here we go. Number 2, nothing will quite go back to normal. Nothing will quite go back to normal. Look at that first line. It takes, depending on what you read, it takes 21 to 66 days to form a habit. Think about yourself, friends. How many new habits have you formed in the last year, right? How many new habits have you formed that you may not even realize are your habits? My husband and I have laughed at some of that. I'm going to need you all to help me by speaking up, because I'm not going to have trouble going back and forth to the chat. There's some good comments, so please don't hesitate to speak up. So our parishioners and our congregations have formed habits. One of the new habits that may be being formed still is that there are a number of pastors who found out they enjoy pre-recording because it means they can get a Sunday off. It's a break for them, even though they've done their due diligence and dealt with worship. Now that some people are back face to face and still streaming, that kind of break isn't there. We need to think that one through. Crisis, and we've been in a crisis mode, accelerates things, makes us feel pressured, makes us feel anxious. And we can't put off making big decisions, but we need to do so carefully. We may not have thought we were going to be making the decisions we are. And for some congregations, friends, this is even a decision about being a church at all. Our co-moderator of the Synod right now can talk about a process. He's been a part of a commission that closed a church in the last 9 months. Interesting story, given COVID. The important thing for me that comes through this is that denial is not a strategy. Denial is not a strategy. And one of the things that I want to add to this is we can only go back to normal if normal still exists. So when it comes to this whole going back to normal and nothing and no one will quite go there, what have you seen? Have you seen people yearning for it? Have you seen people maybe unrealistically, and it even struck you that it was unrealistically thinking that normal was coming?
Yeah,
Yes, Amy, the past we lost. Go ahead, Jessica.
yeah. So yeah, definitely that's been our case. I'm from Pittsburgh. I'm the new COM co-moderator from Pittsburgh Presbytery. I would say yes on a lot of different fronts. Our kids have just transitioned to 5-day-a-week school. Some of them, and some are still hybrid. And I will say families don't. I kind of laughed when you said about forming a habit, because we have been in and out of school, in and out, in and out.
Oh, okay.
I don't know whether the habit been formed.
Okay.
So some of it has been so disruptive that we haven't had any routine. I joked with some of my families who chose the online option for the whole year. I'm like, you were wise, because at least you had stability and you weren't in and out all the time, dealing with disruption constantly. So I question about what kind of habits are being formed, maybe with church in some ways. But one of the things that we've been talking about is that we see these statistics about, I wouldn't say it's 37%, it's probably more like 50% or so attendance.
You're saying that? Okay.
Yeah, so I think 37% is low. And as we've inched back a little bit more, things have definitely improved. But the thing that struck me is that I had a congregation member ask me, like, what our Easter totals were. I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, this is some pre-COVID reality. Like, we're looking for high Easter numbers. It was like so bizarre. Like a total denial that what's been going on. But I feel like in some of our congregations, some folks have lived the pandemic as if nothing hasn't really happened. And so I think that is a challenge. And then you have folks who have taken it very seriously and who are dealing with the trauma of the isolation, and it's going to take time for them to engage in anything. One other thing I'd like to say is my kids play sports. And recreation sports are seeing a huge decline in the number, in some areas are seeing decline in the number of kids participating. And I see this as the crisis as accelerator. So those kids who are kind of more marginal are no longer playing. And I see that just generally in a lot of community organizations, but that's just my 2 cents.
No, I think that's important. And one of the things that you raise, one of the points that you raise is how different this can look from place to place. Ed, is that you that put that in about 51%? I think, from Gary Lyon. So in areas where the churches have been very small, if you look in the chat, some never went away. The disruption is now a break with a larger community known as the Presbytery, where some of our churches are not and will not be coming back, like mine. But most are back functioning as they were, and that is, yeah, I think that's true. I think some of our smaller settings, people continued in their old normal means the way it used to be, 2019. Hopefully there was still some disruption in that, and that they were careful about spacing and masking, but nothing surprises me anymore from some of the stories I've heard. So that is true. And we are an area between West Virginia and a lot of central Pennsylvania where there are rural, tiny, small communities that have kept more of what might be a normal than some others. I still think, and we're going to go, when this moves us to the next one, I still think people who wanted to shift, who might have been ripe for making some shifts, COVID has allowed them to do that. It's curious, this is the only place I've seen this disruption, but I think it's a legitimate conversation. Loyalties will shift significantly. People change when we get to what the next normal, so not something that's not going to shift every 2 months, Jessica. We get to the next normal, we'll see where people are. We'll see how things are settling out. We may find that we will lose people if we stop streaming. If we keep streaming, we'll have them there. One of the things that Carrie emphasizes that I wanted to raise this up because of is that he emphasizes, and this is not a new emphasis, but people don't like it, is that the best place for us to focus our energy and resources is on the people who we've kept and the people who are new, that we've picked up. For years, although we are challenged to go out and reach people who have left or disappeared, it is not where most of our resources are best effectively used. There are folks that have stepped out of church life who maybe it was a helpful reason for them to be able to do that. They don't have to blame it on their own choices. COVID has allowed that opportunity. And one of the truths of all this is that I think is really important for us to remember is that it's probably wiser for us to focus the majority of our time nurturing the people we've kept and the people we've picked up, because the people who are on a mission with us will create a better future than the people who are off mission or who have left the mission. It doesn't mean we don't care. It doesn't mean we don't reach out, but we don't twist ourselves upside down and backwards to become what we were in the fall of 2019, because it's really going to reactivate those folks who have left. It may not. We have to find a happy, prayerful medium that. There's a number of congregations who are getting more giving than they did before the pandemic. They've picked up twice their congregational size on YouTube. There's some folks that have seen more regularity amongst some people who can come on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, that were only 1 week a month comers. It's really interesting. I have noticed it. I'll tell you where I've noticed it. In places where my husband's church is small and where couples are struggling with one another or were pre-pandemic, those couples are more apt to both participate virtually than having to dance around one another in the sanctuary. Think about that one. It's interesting. Whether that's legit or just my warped brain, I don't know, and I can't tell you. But loyalties will shift. Naming that is important. Naming this trend to our leaders, I think, will be important. because any of this stuff, if we have to sit and be uncomfortable and aren't sure why we're uncomfortable with what we're seeing or feeling, the sooner we can talk about it and give it some language, it's better. And you know that Presbyterian leadership, particularly pastors, it's really hard, even with all we've learned in COVID, to let go of the numbers and the names and the faces and the pew that's empty. It's really, really hard to deal with that. So some of this stuff, we need to help people see what's going on and wonder what's next. I want to move on because I'm watching the clock, and there's one of these, one of the last ones I want to make sure we have some extra time with, because I think it gives us lots of opportunity for ministry. Here you go, Jim. A sustainable pace becomes non-negotiable. Friends, the very last major 2-day workshop that I was going around sharing in several different places had to do with clergy wellness, leadership wellness. David, help me honest to that. And it is a real need. It was a real need. It is even more of a need for us to be concerned about wellness now. The statistics around clergy prior to the pandemic and their mental health are not great. There's a book out there, I should get the name and put it in, by the Methodists. They did a big survey in North Carolina. Clergy, pastoral leadership do not do well overall. We don't care for ourselves. We don't take breaks. We don't have niches in which we can just let go of everything and go engage in something else. Some people are real good about this, but many are not. Some of us just pitched a plan to the presbytery leaders about taking on this issue of wellness now, because it's ramped up. When you can get on Zoom at, sometimes for me, it's 8:30 in the morning, and between Zoom and getting work done on my computer, I barely move except for to eat or go to the bathroom until 9 at night or 10. It's so easy to do that, right? How do we help teach pastors and leaders a sustainable pace? Now, I'm going to ask you, have you seen evidence of this? Yes, thank you. The Duke Divinity Report on Clergy Wellness is key. Also, Michael, would you put in the chat Notre Dame Wellness at Work, please?
Yep. Yeah, I'll look that up. Yep.
They are all key, but it's just exacerbated. How many of you have seen, raise your hands in the screens, have seen people overworking and overworrying to get their stuff done? Yep. Execs and stated clerks, you are going to be on the front lines of this because you see the aggregate. You see the aggregate. These are some of the people who are saying, I just can't do this anymore. So I'm going to ask you, and this is brainstorming, what skills, mindsets do pastors and leaders need to navigate, explore, and integrate this disruption? How, off the top of your heads, what are some ways we can help people to deal with this potential to have an unsustainable pace? Because right now your world is in pretty much one place, your home and your computer. Do we tell them to unplug? Do we tell them to turn off their internet?
This is Nancy from Huntington Presbytery. I think you have to tell them that because they're not able to go somewhere. Before the end of last year, we did kind of a survey with some of our pastors to find out how many of them had several weeks of their vacation to take yet for 2020. And they weren't taking it. They weren't taking breaks. So we forced a few of them and we, did some switching around. But I think that's the important thing here is that it's hard for a pastor to stay at home like the rest of us and vacation at home, a staycation. They can't.
It's hard, even if you're not bothered, because everything is around you.
Right.
The thing, Nancy, is I just talked to 2 leaders who talked about coming back from Christmas and felt like they'd never left, not because they were working all Christmas, but because it's just that hard.
Yes.
It's that hard. Dave Lee, would you unmute? I think your point is well spoken. The wellness goals. How does the presbytery engage in helping leadership to find activities that spark joy and passion? And if we hear a little bit of a dog whimper, that's okay if you can.
Well, it's dog noise and it's lawnmowers outside and it's a lot of background noise. But if I hide in this corner and hope the puppy doesn't eat anything she shouldn't, what I'm noticing is the peer groups and folks that I'd been connected with before COVID shut us down, we're staying in touch online. And a number of them are wearing out because they can't do the things that gave them life.
Huh?
They have a whole lot of chores they're having to do still, and they're very busy, but they're not able to do the things that spark them. And that's probably where I'm feeling the wellness pinch the most, limiting the things that really refuel.
And you are dead on. The Notre Dame work takes that head on, that you almost need to be, if you are not a really disciplined person, you almost need to force yourself, even pre-COVID, to discipline yourself into that life-giving time doing something else. One of the things that Rhonda Skipnosker and I sent out in this paperwork we did about clergy wellness for now was, because it's getting warmer, we can draw people out and away, whether it's their ongoing passion or not. So I'm going to be in the park to hike the waterfalls trail at 2:00 on Thursday afternoon. Come join me. Or I want to meet at the bike trail, or. It takes some creative minds to think about those kinds of places, but we can safely, with masks, maybe without, in a small group, depends on you, gather and be together outside. And we are moving into that time. So how do we help give our folks some breathing space, even if it doesn't take them back into their most passionate, joyful times? I think Presbyterian leadership needs to be uber intentional about that. Gary, you were going to say something.
Yes, and from the Pittsburgh Presbyterian, one of the things that the Presbytery did, especially when most churches were shut down here for live services, is they had some of the staff put together sermons, video sermons that were very, very well done, and they were very just good for viewing. And so many pastors took advantage of that. I know I did, and played those instead of preparing a sermon for a certain week. And so I was able to get a break. I mean, life is great when you're not preparing the sermon every week. Yep. And so just having that time during the week to not prepare was just a bonus to me. And then because it was technology driven, just having the video and playing it at that time worked very well. So I'd love to see even more of that. It's great. And from a Presbytery staff person that's doing this, they're not just hitting one congregation by going there on a Sunday morning. They're hitting as many congregations as they can through the video process.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are a number of places where that kind of thing happened. And it was really received well. It also was received well, even if people didn't use it for their primary service, because it gave another voice in the room that people could go see worship. My wondering, and I don't know that this is a brainstorm for right now, but my wondering is, how do we do some of that when we're in a hybrid time, which to me is the future? So how do we do that? Pastors only work one day a week. So what does this conversation look like? I would love for some folks to take that on. Are our congregations renewed enough through this forced shift that they would allow a pastor to not have to be the preacher and stream somebody in, even when they're face-to-face primarily, with a stream on the side? I'm curious, how far can we grow in this? We're going to keep going. I'm watching your clocks. This is really key. And this offers to me some real exciting possibilities that are consistent with the missional push that many of us have been up to in the last few years. Home will emerge as the new hub. Home will emerge as the new hub. We want to get out of our homes, but we've just made them even better sanctuaries than they were in some respects. There are people that are going to be ready to leave, and there are people who are not ready to leave. And there are those who believe that we're going to need those face mask hooks for quite some time to come. Now, there are those of us for whom we've been hearing this for 15 years. The church of the 50s, the church even of the 60s was come to us, fix up the bathroom in the parking lot and come to us. Come look at our program list and come to us. Look at our pew cushions, come to us. Even more, that is not looking like the future that's coming. Going out, always been a missional thought. Going out to connect with people. I don't quite understand the way my colleague listed this one. So I'm sorry if it doesn't make sense. But people, if people can come to us online, it's going to talk to us about the church, what the church is, the building. It's going to talk to us about how we frame our work. In the post-pandemic world, if we're waiting for people to come, we're not likely going to get anywhere, even more than we weren't getting anywhere before, except I can imagine some of those small rural places we talk about being other than that. But it's going to be smarter to go to where people are, whether that's to open our doors and wander across the street to the park in the small town, whether it's to engage in mission visibly in the community. People have more reason to not come inside the door while still be able to come inside our ministry. Does that make sense to you? That's a real important difference. People can become a part of our ministry without coming in the door. And if we haven't been accepting that, we may need to start doing it even in smaller settings, maybe not our tiniest. That's one for our brains to wrap around. Since the crisis began, look at this. Can you see this? You don't need anecdotal to see what's been happening in the home. You probably lived some of this. How many spent more money on Amazon than in previous years? How many got groceries delivered? Sometimes I did it because I needed it time-wise, not because I was afraid or didn't know when I could best go to the store. How many had a chance to go out to sit in a restaurant, but said, not so much. I'm going to take out and set it up at my house. How many people bought fitness equipment? I didn't, but I know a number who did. This is true. So we have to think about those implications for our ministry. We're going to keep going here before I want us to discuss this one. Yeah, a little more. I just copied this right. I did what Tim did. I wanted you to see the language. The implication that this is Newhouse in Newhoff in another article that I also listed at the end of this. We cannot, as I said, gather people. Networking is about handing out cards that you can call the right person at the right time. You've all come away from conferences with a pocket of cards that you don't have anywhere to put. Connecting people in his framework is about piecing people together for the right reasons. Dave Lee, connecting people together for their passion niches is one of the ways we help them get the breaks they need and do something different. The presbytery's role may be as a grand connector. And the synod's role, we've said our role is we have a low balcony that we can put one and one together. This is even more the future. In some ways, we need to begin to reframe our minds so that if people connect into a piece of our mission, they are no less a part of ministry than if they're sitting in the pew on Sunday. This also speaks to nuns and duns, which Tim brought up. Now I'm going to push beyond the disruption for a minute because I think this is an important trend. It is exacerbated by COVID, but it was real beforehand. The language that is out there in some places is a language that talks about micro gatherings and distributed gatherings. People watching from home count. How do we work with people that are different places? House churches may be on the rise, or connected house churches, maybe a congregation. A house gathering of people for dinner and a conversation, or maybe right now in the yard, a picnic and conversation. That's a micro gathering. A small gathering of people for a purpose a church supports. Distributed gatherings would be on Thursday night during the summer. We can safely gather in groups of 6 to 8, maybe 10 in your backyard. One group is gathering on Thursday night under the guise of the church to have a book study. Another group is gathering to talk about a movie. Another group is gathering to study scripture. Distributed gatherings are more like we're under an umbrella, but we're happening in different places at the same time. Make sense? And I would almost call some of our multi-campus megachurches, which, what does that mean here in our neck of the woods? Oh, LCBC. We have one example of some of this in Lancaster area. I would look at multi-campus churches in some ways as distributed gatherings. There's often one preacher that's piped through to all those gatherings, but they each have their own flavor. So small gatherings of people working in ministry, distributed gatherings, people in different places. Think about how COVID helps us to lean into this. We already know that nuns and duns and younger people want to do where their passions and interests are. Think about how, because of maybe COVID, we are getting better in our minds about how to be church this way. Are you with me? Nod your heads, I'm looking at you, or question me.
So
Mike,
Sue, one of the things running through my mind in this, and I think Newhoff gets this probably in his little tweet quote there. I think what's going to become even more important in all of this is for our congregations to have a genuine sense of mission and purpose, that they can say, here's what we believe God is doing in our area. And we're betting that God is active, that the social reasons, the cultural reasons, the things that have supported the mainline church, they're dropping away. Our ministries are going to be about Jesus Christ, or they're not going to be about anything. And I think that's going to come all the more to the fore for us.
Newhoff, I don't think I clipped it out, but Newhoff even suggested that churches talk with folks about becoming neighborhood leaders. And this pushes back to Alan Roxburgh's work, right? Years ago. That they take on being in ministry in their neighborhood. Now, they're still a part of the church, but they're tasked out there, not in here. So people don't come in to do, they go out to do. And you can see in this quote, I'm not going to read it all. The church building becomes a place for equipping, for training, for putting out from to some of these places. And just because they aren't attending doesn't mean they aren't engaged. How do we shift our minds? Because this, I want to see some amens and smiles on this one. How quickly does that precious older leader make a quick quipped comment that cuts somebody right out of the picture because they weren't at the right place at the right time? Where were you at the spaghetti dinner last week? Or, oh, it's Easter, you weren't in church. That's not helpful to what's coming or what is bursting through. And that you're going to see this already, I believe, in some of our megas, which I'm not saying we want to be megas. I have my own pet peeves with all of that. But I think what we see sometimes in the megas is they have connected with burgeoning culture more quickly than the main line because they're newer. We still have this history of tradition and what has been that we have to climb out up the well over the top. Make sense? I'm excited about this. I'm excited about the possibility of homes. I'm excited about distributed gatherings. I'm excited about tasking people to not come, but to be in their communities and to see what that looks like. Number 5, remote work will move from an emergency or luxury to a necessity. All I want to say about this one is this is true. We sold our building in November, the Synod building, because we knew if we didn't do it sooner, we wouldn't be able to do it later. You have seen, if you live in an area where there are lots of big offices, you're beginning to see big office buildings crack and go up on the market or not be as full as they were. If you're in rural areas, you may not be seeing this, but folks are working more at home. The real estate market is, if you don't know, a nightmare right now. People are moving out of the urban areas, in part because of the compact world in more urban areas and the potential spread of COVID and whatever, but also because they can work from home or work mostly from home. They can't get houses on the market fast enough, and they're going up incredible amounts above asking price. That's because of this. We've got people that just put up big buildings in the Harrisburg area who are never going to fill them again, and they just put them up. So mid-size is not bad. Or they're recreating the whole rise of, what's the name of it, co-working spaces for people who are working at home to go spend a couple hours a day around other people who are each working in their own business in a lovely cafe-like setting with internet. Generates creativity, but it's still not the office. We're seeing this. We're going to see it even more. That's a reality. What does the church do with this? How many have really preferred afternoons working by the fireplace in Panera's drinking coffee than your office at the church? I did when I was doing it. Instability combined with rapid change will require even more agility. Makes sense? Amen. We know this. How do we, as presbytery leaders, help to encourage flexibility in our leadership? We are not a denomination historically that has encouraged flexibility. I won't mention the Book of Order or Robert, anybody named Robert. We have encouraged what was, and consistency and patterns, and I'm not belittling those. It was but we are having another workshop right now called Bending the Book. We have people that are flexible by personality type. We have people that are rigid by personality type. How do we encourage folks to be flexible? Because a world that is changing is a world that needs flexibility. Now, last week, we hosted a workshop time that's available online on improvisation. There are some folks in Carlisle who spent 6 months or more practicing improv with that same leader because it helped them get a mindset that was most responsive to this time and this place. Any comments, any thoughts about this one? How do presbyteries, I want to ask you, how do presbyteries help us to practice flexibility? Going once?
I think, Sue, the way I'm trying to do that is naming possibilities that I feel anxious about. I mean, so saying to congregations doing search, well, here's some ways that this can move forward. And in my head going, my gosh, I would never want to do A. You know, just like personally, like I can tell inside myself, but naming it anyway without naming my anxieties, because I'm trying to be aware that agility is ability.
But I also think, Michael, that as a leader, saying, you know, I'm a little anxious about this is not a bad thing, because you're probably naming something that's in others. For years, we've been talking about experiment, and you will fail, and that's okay. We need to let people know not everything is going to go well, and that it makes us a little nervous, but we still go forward anyway. Who else? Gary Lyon, how do we help to share flexibility or teach it? I'm picking on you because I know your tenure, and you've been somewhere a long time. You've been working in the presbytery a long time. How do we encourage flexibility? Shaking your head no.
Putting me on the spot, are you?
I seriously asked you that because of you have been somewhere a long time, and yet I consider you to be often an open person. I know not always you want to make changes, but how do we encourage flexibility when we're used to such deep patterns? I'll take you off the spot. If you want to answer, answer. If anybody else wants to answer, answer.
I'm thinking hard.
It is that hard, isn't it?
It's very hard, and I think we really just have to be constantly talking, constantly pushing, constantly offering possibilities and waiting on the Spirit. But we can't be sitting back and waiting. I've often told people, I had a chaplain at college who said there's a lot of doors open and you have to walk through them. If God's going to close them, God will close them, but you got to walk through them. So we have to be willing to risk, and whatever that might be.
So what I like about that is that's faith language. That we have. Sometimes the road is not straight. How often? Oh Lord, how long? But we do. We are called to walk through doors, and that may not be the final door. So maybe that is a helpful learning towards flexibility. Dave Lee is also very correct. And as leadership, I think our own anxiety keeps us from doing this. Confidence and joyful courage that churches dare to fail while trying. If we dare to try and fail and admit that and share our learnings, we are also helping to grow that skill. It can be learned, but there are folks for whom it is easier than others, and we can't be negative towards those for whom it's very difficult. But agility is ability. I hate trite phrases, but it's real. That's true. I much prefer flexibility as a superpower. It means we all need a shirt with an upside down triangle or whatever and a big F on it. Flexibility, not always known as a church's strong suit, is it? People want us to be the place where they can count on everything to be the same. At least our older congregation does. Our tried and true congregation does, that we've known for years. I think we are being asked other. We need to talk about how to balance that. This will be in the PowerPoint. These are some of the things I've shared. You had quotes pulled from. They are not all awesome theology, but there are pieces of truth in them that I think are helping us to look as we go forward. It is important that we as leaders be aware that the trends are changing and name that for folks. Help folks see that they are. You may see other ones. I'd love to hear what they are. I think it's important that we help folks not thwart themselves by continuing to talk about normal. How many times I have heard a leader say, absolutely, I am not going back to where it was. Oh, we can't have that conversation online because it's much better to have it face to face. Well, I'm not saying there isn't truth in that, but what if we have to have that conversation online? And if you set the stage by saying we can't, the trends are leading us in the direction of saying we've learned some really good stuff that we can refine about moving differently than we have in the past and about making different assumptions about the way we move. I'm praying that together we can continue to help God reframe this church and just be a little more intentional about it ourselves rather than reactive, which is where we started with COVID, all of us. We were reacting. Some of us that were a little bit further down the techno curve helped others, but it is stunning to see where folks have shown they can come. But how many of those folks were willing to come because they said this is temporary, right? And Tom said it this morning in the devotion. It wasn't temporary when COVID started, and I'm not sure it's temporary now. What we will have is another medium to be working in, which is the one we were more familiar with, which was face-to-face, but it doesn't mean everything else goes away. I have 12:02. Any comments for the good of the order?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Rich conversation.
Let me pray.
Thank you, Susan.
I'll pray us away for lunch, and we'll see you back for the always much anticipated Board of Pensions update. Let's pray. Gracious Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the energy, for the awareness, for the minds. I can see them churning. I pray that you would help us to hold sincerely the possible changes that are even beginning now and coming to us, that we might draw forward our leaders, our congregations, into a world that is not going to go backwards, but indeed bounce forward. Help us to trust in you in new ways that allow us to take the risks to make these steps. Be with us as we share our meal, not together, but at the same time. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thanks all.